Hi, my name is Corral Edmonds. In this video, we will be discussing art, mainly from the 1500s. We'll be discussing a couple of artists from the 1500s, mainly focusing on Holbein, Rauschenberg, Scott Grisbeck, and Ken Gonzalez. I know I butchered the names a little bit, but it's okay. And then we're going to later relate them into artists from today and contemporary art. So the first image that you just seen was made by Holbein, an artist in the 1500s. And the first question that I would like to answer is, why do you think Holbein was trying to achieve, or what do you think Holbein was trying to achieve with the anamorphic feature of the portrait? So my intake on the photo was that he was trying to distort the image so that the viewer got a lot of um, different thoughts on the picture at once, but then bring the pictures together. So, what the picture is trying to portray is things that were happening in England at the time. When I was watching the video, the analysis of the video, the picture is almost broken up into four different segments, and each segment has a different message, but then it's still tied into one. So in the picture, when you look at it, you see one picture, but then as you start to break it apart, you see different things. You see a music book, you see some instruments. If you look closely at his at the outfits, there was the left side is more like geared towards I would say like royalty, and the right not as much, and then it comes all together. So I think what he was trying to achieve was giving the viewer a lot of different messages, but making it flow together. So what anamorphic is like a distorted picture or perspective, and I believe the perspective, I would say, mostly is what was distorted in this picture, because it kind of gives the viewer a lot of thoughts on the picture, but then it's still a very well clean put together picture that I really like. I would like to answer is, if the artists that we were examining this week were making their own intake on anamorphic editing or the anamorphic feature, and I would say yes. As I examine each one, I see qualities from anamorphic, and then they make it their own. So I'll start with Rosenberg, who was known for pop art, and pop art is a form of distortion. It's a whole bunch of different pictures put into one. So he took the anamorphic feature and then made it his own, bringing color and different pictures and introducing us to that. And then we have Scott Gresback, who focused on a sort of altered reality. So his pictures, the ones that I found, were mainly in black and white. So I'll show a couple of them here in the slide. And they just were altered reality. So they were kind of like things happening now, but altered to make it more like distorted and weird and creative. And then going into Ken Gonzalez, whose images were distorted in a way that was dark and thought provoking. It was a little gloomy. I would say a little push back from anamorphic in a way, but still anamorphic. But he put his own intake on it, which was like that dark and gloomy thought. So all artists changed the anamorphic art, which again is like distorted projection or perspective, and made it to their own. They gave it their own twist, which I feel makes a great artist. So the next question that I'm going to be answering is, do I see a trend between artists from the 1500s and contemporary artists today? And I will say yes, completely. So contemporary art is art of now. It's from the 20th century. It focuses on culture, diversity, and it kind of like makes a play on that and can show an artist's creative side. So sometimes the pictures are very hard to understand what the artist was trying to achieve, and then sometimes not as much depending on the artist. But contemporary, it's a huge range, and I love it. So going back to the 1500s, I would say the only difference was their pictures were more photographic, more like photography. It would still be contemporary because some, like I said, had the augmented reality. Some were dark and gloomy, some were clean and cut, but then, like I'm talking about Rosenberg, it was clean and cut, but then it had the different symbols in there to tell you what was going on in England. So it was still that contemporary play on culture and diversity and things happening at the time, but then augmented at the same time. Versus now, contemporary can be whatever. It can be just lines, it can be splats, it can be a full thought out picture, but it's still not just black and white. Like, you automatically look at it and see the message. So Oh, I said Rothenberg. I meant to say Holbein. So, like I was saying, yeah, Holbein's image was about culture in England. It was distorted, but not, it didn't directly scream out the message to you. You kind of had to figure it out and break it apart yourself. And that's exactly what contemporary art is today. So I would feel like contemporary artists from today use the trends from the 1500s to make it is what it is now, but just made it a little more modern because times change, people change, likings change, and contemporary art is still that same play on culture and diversity and things happening during the time, but just a little more distorted, I would say, because it makes it just a little more interesting. So overall, the art that I examined today was pretty interesting. I'm not really into the culture of the 1500s, so it wasn't as interesting as I would say art today is for me now. But it still was interesting to know where the artists were and where their head was at the time and the thoughts that they were trying to portray. I would say my favorite artist was Rothenberg with the pop art. I like pop art. I like it now. I think it's really cool that it was like a thing back in the 1500s. I'm going to show some of the pictures that I found on the internet that I liked. I like the color because some of the pictures that I seen from the other artists were like black and white. I like the color and the textures. I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, the art was pretty awesome.